I'm Emily Chang, and this is the best of Bloomberg Technology, where we bring you all our top interviews from this week in tech. Coming up, 2018 marked Twitter's first full year of profitability, but surprised investors by reporting daily active users for the first time. The number is even smaller than Snap's. We'll hear from CFO Ned Siegel. Plus, tech investor Rodger McNamee has gone from one of Facebook's biggest supporters to one of its most vocal critics. His call to action for Mark Zuckerberg and Sheryl Sandberg. And tech's going public pipeline is picking up. Messaging service Slack files paperwork for its direct listing. First, to our top story. Twitter gave a lackluster first quarter sales forecast and reported tepid user growth, suggesting changes to improve the social media platform haven't yet attracted a much wider audience. But the company did start reporting daily active users for the first time at 126 million. It's smaller than some might have thought, but has grown 9% year over year. The company also said it would no longer report the number of monthly active users after the first quarter. Shares plunged after the report. I caught up with Twitter CFO Ned Siegel Thursday and asked what he has to say to investors.
We had a record quarter to finish a record year. The highest revenue Twitter's ever had, the most profits, and the highest level of profitability we've ever had. So we feel great about our momentum going from 2018 into 2019. We're really excited to reaffirm our same priorities that we were executing against last year as we go into 2019. And we're going to just work hard to deliver great outcomes one day at a time.
Now, you made a big disclosure change reporting daily active users for the first time, and you're stopping reporting monthly active users. Why do this now? Why not a few quarters ago?
Sure. Well, this has been a long journey for Twitter, where we started giving monthly active users at the time of the IPO. But gradually there's been a shift inside the company where our priority as a company is really to drive value for people on Twitter every day. The best way to measure that is by monetizable DAU. That's the metric that we've been looking at internally to measure our success for some time. We've given the year-over-year growth rates for it since 2016 publicly, but we want everybody aligned around the same metric that we goal against internally, so there's transparency, so there's alignment, so we're all looking at the same number when we think about how to measure our success.
So you reported 126 million DAUs. Snap, meantime, just reported 186 million DAUs. Facebook, 1.5 billion. So why should advertisers choose Twitter, which appears to be the smallest audience?
Well, advertisers come to Twitter because we have the most valuable audience when they're most receptive. So today's information doesn't change anything for them. They know exactly what they're getting when they come to Twitter with a specific objective in mind, whether they're launching a new movie, a new phone, if they're advertising during the Super Bowl to amplify their message. We had 30 of the 38 Super Bowl advertisers on Twitter on the day of the Super Bowl, amplifying their message because they know that's where their customers were. So this doesn't change anything from an advertiser perspective. We also share a number that's a little different than other companies. Ours is all monetizable daily active users who come to twitter.com or who come to the app. And that might be different than how other companies look at it. They might be sharing a family of apps and how many users they have, or they might be sharing users who are on a different part of the service that might not see ads.
But you don't know for sure. How do you know what they're sharing?
I know what we share, and what we share is the number that we're trying to drive. Those are all people on twitter.com. They're all people who are on our app, and that's the number that we're trying to drive, and they can all see ads today.
Have you seen any increase in advertising or influx of advertisers as a result of the scandals and controversies at Facebook?
Well, we think about the things that we can control. And if we look at the last couple of years and the recovery that we've been driving, it feels like so much of it is because of things that we're doing better. The service is much better than it used to be for the people on it, where it's easier to find the things you're looking for, where there's an events and topics infrastructure that allows you to follow things that might have been harder to find before. For advertisers, we're much more clear. They should come to Twitter when they want to launch a new product or service, or when they want to connect with what's happening. I think that clarity has helped us internally. I think it's helped externally a lot as well.
Now, monthly users are declining, and this is the number that you're going to stop reporting. But do you think that the changes that you're making to the platform will increase overall monthly users, or are you really focused on increasing the engagement of the daily users?
We think the changes we're making to the service ought to grow daily usage of Twitter over time. That's going to be the best way to measure our success. We're not trying to get people to come to Twitter monthly. Twitter's a place where news breaks. It's a place where conversations are happening around sports and politics and entertainment and things that people care about. And if you're coming monthly, we're not doing a good job helping you find value in Twitter. So when we're making changes to the service, we're thinking about how we can help people get value from it every day.
So spending is rising 20%. Is this a one-off, or is the cost structure changing for the long term?
Well, we grew expenses 17% last year, but if you look at the fourth quarter, which represents all the hiring we did throughout the year, where headcount grew about 16% over the course of the year, our expenses grew 21% in the fourth quarter. If you annualize that, and you add merit increases and other things on top of it, and new hires as well, because we will continue to hire against the same priorities in 2019, it's pretty easy to get to approximately 20% expense growth, which is what we talked about. So this isn't a change for us. This is a continuation against the same priorities, thinking about health, conversations as a way to drive audience on Twitter, our revenue products and sales, and the platform that we use to deliver Twitter.
Do you see that 20% number staying the same over the next several years, or is that an annual thing?
Well, it's an annual thing for 2019. We'll think about next year, or we'll talk about next year more when we get there. But as we make investments in 2019, we're not just thinking about this year. We're thinking about hiring people who can have impact at Twitter over long periods of time and delivering on our purpose over long periods of time.
So what are the product changes that you are making that you think are going to expand the overall audience?
I'll give you a couple examples. One is one from the fourth quarter, and then there are a couple that are in front of us. On the fourth quarter, we made it easier to switch back and forth between the reverse chronological timeline, so you're just seeing the latest tweets, and one where we use an algorithm to surface the most relevant tweets first. That's about transparency. It's about helping you figure out or decide what you want to see in the moment. We're really proud of the change. We executed on it fast, and
we've seen during the Super Bowl. So
awesome. I love to hear that. I did too. It was a great use case for it, where you really want to know what people are saying exactly in that moment when a field goal is made or missed, or when a critical call has been made. That had a really positive impact that we were really pleased about, not just externally, but internally, because it showed us that we could move fast and we could try things and we could have great outcomes as a result of it. When we look ahead, there are a couple areas that we think about. The first is conversations. We want to make it easier for people to tweet and to be a part of a conversation. And the second is events and topics, because right now you follow people, but you care about a topic or event. That's what brings you to Twitter.
That was Twitter CFO Ned Siegel. Coming up, Alphabet reports fourth quarter results exposing new pressure on margins and spending at the tech giant. We will bring you the highlights. Plus, GoPro has struggled to attract a wider customer base for its cameras beyond snowboarders and other outdoor enthusiasts. But last quarter showed a pickup in sales. We will hear from GoPro CEO Nick Woodman. This is Bloomberg. Alphabet reported fourth quarter revenue that beat expectations, but heavy spending to expand its cloud and YouTube businesses resulted in thinner profit margins. CFO Ruth Porat addressed rising costs on the earnings call.
The key drivers were, first, content acquisition costs, primarily for YouTube, mostly for our advertising-supported content in what is a seasonally strong quarter for YouTube, but also for our newer subscription businesses, YouTube Premium and YouTube TV, which have higher CAC as a percentage of revenues.
IDC President Crawford Del Pret and Paul Sweeney with Bloomberg News joined us Monday to give us their thoughts.
This is not a revenue problem, right? This is an operating margin problem. And, we saw that even though revenue in the core advertising business was quite strong, and even though revenue in some of the other revenue, which would be things like Pixel and Google Home, actually beat expectations slightly, they just are having to pay more for some of the services that they want to create. I mean, if you believe in the long game here, if you believe that this company is really going to develop over-the-top services, they're going to have to pay more for them. And you have to adjust your model in terms of what they're going to pay for those services, particularly to their TAC distribution partners. And I think Google really is going to be trying to be the video disruptor here. And that's what you're seeing in the numbers, which is a cramping of the operating margins.
Now, I spoke to Porat just before she jumped on the earnings call and asked her specifically about CapEx. And she told me we remain very focused on investing for the long term. We take a disciplined approach to key areas. CapEx growing at a sizable clip. The primary driver continues to be investing in technical infrastructure to support growth, data centers, and machines. This reflects our outlook for global growth in ads, search, YouTube, and cloud. So sort of echoing, Crawford, what you suggested there. But Paul, investors are concerned about it.
Yeah, I think they are in the short term here, but I think the market has generally given Ruth Porat, very, very high grades for coming in and really instilling a sense of, I think, more certainty as it relates to both their operating expenses and their CapEx, so a certain level of discipline. But, the three areas where they are investing are very high growth areas, including YouTube. Internet ad spending on video is the fastest part of internet ad spending, and clearly Google's is a leader there with YouTube. So when you combine that with the cloud, another extremely fast-growing end user business, I think longer term, most Google investors feel very comfortable with Google's P&L and capital spending.
Now, there continues to be questions about how much Amazon is now taking a bite out of the digital ad pie. When Amazon reported its results, their other revenue category, which is mainly advertising, rocketed up to $10 billion. So we asked about Amazon and how serious a threat Amazon is in the conversation with Ruth Porat, and she said, whenever new inventory is created that attracts consumer interest, advertisers will be interested in advertising against that inventory. The market is continuing to grow, and there is still a tremendous amount that is offline. Crawford, would you say that the pie is growing, or is Amazon actually a threat to Alphabet?
Amazon is absolutely a threat. Amazon has got a lot of properties. They're going to be bringing on a tremendous amount of inventory going forward. And if nothing else, the classic law of economics, right? What does that mean? It means there's going to be more supply for, a finite amount of demand. So what Google is going to try to do is they're going to try to create more valuable services where they can potentially offset some of those trends. But, Amazon getting into this market, like Amazon getting into most people's market, is a threat to Google in this space.
Now, I got a question earlier. Why don't investors punish Amazon for the pressure on its margins, but punish Google in this way? And there's still a lot of data that Google doesn't give us about how fast YouTube is growing, how fast is the cloud growing, how fast is the company really diversifying beyond advertising. Paul, do we get any hints here about, how healthy is the cloud business? How healthy is YouTube, even though it has a lot of potential?
No, you're right. Google needs to do a better job with disclosure. We've been saying to them for some time, particularly about YouTube, because it's a business that's probably $8 or $9 billion of run rate revenue, relatively high margins, and we think it remains a long-term growth story for them. But I agree with Crawford that it's requiring a lot of investment, and that is pinching profitability in the near term. But I think this company, historically, Alphabet has gotten the benefit of the doubt from shareholders for making the long-term bets, not just the near-term operating expenses, but the long-term bets. Ruth has dialed back some of those crazier, more moonshot type things, and they've really focused on three key areas which they think can drive growth. And I think, again, most long-term investors will give them the benefit of the doubt.
Crawford Del Pret of IDC and Bloomberg's Paul Sweeney there. Well, GoPro reported a profit in the fourth quarter and beat Wall Street expectations after the company cut costs and picked up sales during the key holiday shopping season. But the future of GoPro's success hinges on new product launches. Bloomberg's Selena Wang caught up with CEO Nick Woodman Thursday.
We're showing a lot of growth internationally, which is terrific. We're up significantly in EMEA and APAC in the fourth quarter, and I'm really excited that We showed consistent results last year. We were running a very predictable business because we returned to a product strategy and a pricing strategy we know very well. So it's great to have that predictability back in the business. And we finished the fourth quarter up 20% in terms of unit sell-through year over year. So that's terrific momentum.
But the new positioning of GoPro is that you're not trying to be relevant to everyone, but super serve that core customer. But how do you continue to monetize that same pool of people?
Well, we haven't reached everybody in the world that can benefit from a GoPro. The strategy you're referring to is customer segmentation and better understanding who in the world has a problem that GoPro can solve for them. And it's funny you call it a new strategy because it's actually our original go-to-market strategy. It's how we built the brand, it's how we built the business, serving very specific customers that would benefit from GoPro. And after going public, we adjusted our strategy a bit and tried to be more relevant to everybody. And it turns out that it's better business for us to better understand the various customer segments specifically and address their needs with specific product and marketing that resonates with them.
So in December, GoPro said it'd be moving U.S.-bound camera production out of China to avoid any potential tariffs. Why did you choose Mexico as a new location?
For several reasons. There's some cost benefits to moving some of our production to Mexico. There's supply chain benefits, and it just makes a lot of sense for many reasons. And while tariffs, the threat of tariffs, we haven't been included on a list, but while the threat of tariffs served as a catalyst to get us thinking about moving production out of China, once we did our homework, it just made a lot of sense on many levels. It's just smart business. So tariffs or no tariffs, we're moving our U.S.-bound production to Guadalajara.
But walk me through how these cost savings work. Without the tariffs, why exactly is it cheaper to be in Mexico versus China?
Because China's getting more expensive to do business in.
Is this something you would have considered without the threat of tariffs?
I think we would have eventually gotten there, but not as quickly as we have.
What other countries were in consideration?
Malaysia was a consideration, but at the end of the day, Mexico's got terrific infrastructure, and for our business in the Americas, it makes a lot of sense. So we decided to move to Mexico. So
camera sales in the Asia-Pacific region have been growing quite significantly, but can you talk about the China demand as a result of some of the macroeconomic headwinds?
China was more challenging last year, but we still managed to grow 2%, which is great. It's a big opportunity for us in China. China is an expensive place to do business, and it's great to see GoPro thriving there. It shows that our go-to-market strategy and global demand for GoPro extends into the Chinese market, so there's obviously a lot of opportunity for us there.
Is that a market you're going to continue to invest and double down in from a marketing perspective?
Yeah, we have sales and marketing offices in China and operations as well. It's an important hub for us.
So several of GoPro's efforts to diversify beyond action cameras have struggled, including the drone business, the media and entertainment one, but the software business seems to be taking off with the Cloud Plus subscription. So what exactly is the roadmap for growing that software revenue?
Well, GoPro serves as a solution for people that want to capture and share experiences. And that starts with the camera. But then we also need to solve for helping people offload their footage, archive it, access it, get more out of it. GoPro Plus offers unlimited cloud storage of photo and video content for our customers. It also offers you break it, we replace it, damage guarantee. GoPros are used during activities that could otherwise, damage other consumer electronics. So we want to guarantee our products for our customers, and we'll be rolling out other features and benefits that excite our customers. And for $4.99 a month, Plus offers a lot of value, and we're seeing strong interest, and we're intending to build on that this year.
And this is an exciting area for investors. You get higher margins on that software side versus the hardware side of the business. So looking out into the future, 3 to 5 years, what proportion of revenue could software subscription services become?
It can have a meaningful impact on our gross margin, that's for sure. We're already starting to see that, which is terrific. We talked a bit about that on the call yesterday. We've got some work to do to drive awareness of Plus. As we've shared previously, awareness of our cloud subscription offering is roughly 20-25% amongst our community. So there's a lot of opportunity there, a lot of work to do. And we've also been doing research to understand what our customers want to see from the Plus subscription. And we rolled out on January 30th unlimited cloud storage and increased discounts at GoPro.com to serve as a bit of a loyalty program for our customers. And we've seen a nice uptick in subscriptions since then. So more planned for this year.
That was GoPro CEO Nick Woodman with Bloomberg's Selena Wang. Coming up, messaging startup Slack inches closer to going public, filing the key paperwork with regulators to move ahead with a direct listing. And if you like Bloomberg News, check us out on the radio. Listen on the Bloomberg app, Bloomberg.com, and in the U.S. on SiriusXM. This is Bloomberg. Messaging platform Slack is moving along with its plans to go public, filing confidential paperwork with regulators. This is just one of several high-profile tech companies on track to hit the public markets in 2019, including Uber and Lyft. Bloomberg's Olivia Zaleski discussed the filing with us on Monday.
So today, Slack confidentially filed for a proposed public listing, which is sort of filing speak for a direct listing. So direct listing, for those of you who are not familiar with this, is essentially when a company lets its shareholders, its employees, and early investors sell their shares on the public markets, but it doesn't go through the traditional IPO process of using underwriters and big banks to do a whole marketing campaign for them in a roadshow, and essentially allows the early investors to get liquidity in the employees without generating more cash for the company, which creates a lot of dilution.
So this is something that Spotify did as well. It is unusual. Why is Slack going this route?
Well, they're going this route for two reasons, mainly because they already have a lot of cash. They're sitting on a lot of cash right now, and they don't need the marketing or the PR, the publicity, the recognition that comes with the traditional IPO. They really just want to give their early investors and their employees some liquidity.
And also, they can sell the shares right away. There's no
right. There's no lockup, and the biggest reason is it doesn't create dilution. I mean, that's huge for a founder. They don't want to dilute their shares and bring in all this cash that they don't necessarily need.
So, what are the risks? Potential risks?
The jury is still really out on this. Spotify had a very successful listing. I mean, their shares as of today were down 6% from the day that they opened publicly, but that's normal. I think that some people have said there's a risk that the shares could flop on opening day, and you don't have the underwriters to sort of prop up the price of the shares and to guarantee it. But, if the banks do their job, and there are experienced bankers working on this, we understand Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs and Allen Co., and they did Spotify's direct listing, they should do a good job leading up to it of really getting the right price for the shares, understanding, on the supply side, what people are willing to sell for, and understanding on the buy side what people are willing to pay.
What about the chance of a government shutdown, another shutdown? I mean, we've been talking a lot on the show about how, the initial shutdown stalled things at the SEC, could have perhaps slowed things down for Uber and Lyft.
Right.
We don't know. We don't have any concrete details on whether the process actually slowed down, but it certainly has the potential.
I mean, it definitely slowed things down. There's a huge backlog at the SEC right now. I think there's sort of this sense of like a boogeyman waiting in the wings. What's going to happen next week? It could delay things even further. We understand that the SEC is just proceeding, as everything is normal, and there is a backlog, and they're just going to get through things. I mean, Slack has said that it will. Actually, they haven't said this. We understand that Slack is planning to, aim to go late spring, middle of the year. So, I mean, it shouldn't delay things too much if there's another, shutdown, unless the shutdown goes on for months and months, in which case everything will be delayed.
Bloomberg's Olivia Zaleski, and I should mention Bloomberg Beta, the venture capital arm of Bloomberg LP, is an investor in Slack. Coming up, from ally to opponent, we discuss Rodger McNamee's new book on what he calls the Facebook catastrophe and the danger he says the social network is posing to the world. And Bloomberg Tech is live streaming on Twitter. You can check us out at Technology. Follow our global breaking news network TikTok on Twitter. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to the best of Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang. 15 years ago, this past Monday, a young Mark Zuckerberg launched what is now known as Facebook. And just a couple of years after, Rodger McNamee, an early investor in the company, became a mentor to Zuckerberg. But now things have changed. McNamee has gone from Facebook backer to vocal critic. This is from a 2016 memo McNamee sent to Zuckerberg and COO Sheryl Sandberg. Recently, Facebook has done some things that are truly horrible, and I can no longer excuse its behavior. Facebook is enabling people to do harm. It has the power to stop the harm. What it currently lacks is an incentive to do so. McNamee's journey is laid out in his new book titled Zucked, Waking Up to the Facebook Catastrophe. Rodger McNamee joined us from New York to talk about the book Tuesday.
With respect to the earnings, it makes total sense that they would have had a blowout quarter. Remember, if you're an advertiser, you have to go where the audience is, and Facebook has the largest audience on earth. It has the best targeting. Its ad product is second to none. I'm trying to introduce people to a book. If I want to reach people with a book about Facebook and Instagram, there's really nothing quite like advertising on Facebook and Instagram. So I'm not even remotely surprised they had record earnings. The one thing that I think every analyst would note is that there are a lot more ads in your news feed than there used to be. In my case, every fifth or sixth post is an ad. That's probably twice as many as I would have had a year ago. And I don't know how many ads they can put in the news feed before it really harms the experience. And candidly, I like ads in Facebook, so I don't mind them, but there are an awful lot of them.
But it's not just about the profit, it's about the user growth. They saw daily active users grow in the U.S. and Europe. I
would like to suggest that a tad of skepticism would be appropriate there. You may remember, I don't know, it was 8, 9 months ago, they told us that they had blocked 1 billion inauthentic accounts from being formed on Facebook. When you're blocking 1 billion inauthentic accounts, you have a lot of opportunity to let a few through if you need to. I mean, Facebook also told you in the quarter that before very long they're going to stop reporting Facebook as a broken out piece. They're going to integrate it with Instagram and WhatsApp. I don't think they're doing that because the numbers at Facebook look great. We also know from Nielsen that usage on a per user basis is down dramatically over the past year. I think the number's like 20% or something. What it is doesn't matter so much, other than people have changed their behavior. And you saw this in the 2018 midterms, where the effectiveness of disinformation was radically reduced with at least a portion of the Facebook audience. And that was really encouraging. I mean, I look at these things and I go, I understand why the stock's up. The problems I'm talking about aren't rearward looking, they're forward looking, and we really do need to address them.
But you're suggesting Facebook could be juicing the numbers and not shutting down as many fake accounts as they could?
I'm saying, no, I'm not suggesting anything. I'm simply saying you can't exclude that when let's think about this in the context of other things. Facebook has, these automated systems for getting rid of hate speech. And, what they define as hate speech has a large influence on what the percentage is of successful capture. And my only point is, it's a black box. We can't audit it. We do not know. Facebook has huge incentives to make the numbers appear like they're rising. And I just would say, if you look at their behavior over the past 2 years, what is the argument for taking the number at face value? I don't see one.
Right. So Facebook did release a statement about your criticism, saying we take criticism seriously. Over the past 2 years, we've fundamentally changed how we operate to better protect the safety and security of people using Facebook. The reality is Rodger McNamee hasn't been involved with Facebook for a decade. What's your response to that?
Well, really simply, it's demonstrably true. I've not been involved for at least 9 years. But let's look at the front half of that, because I'm an analyst. I don't need to be on the inside to be able to observe things that I read in the newspaper and understand what they mean. But they're saying that they're protecting users. Well, last week, Apple expelled Facebook for a day, and Google as well, for having so-called research applications that they tried to sneak into the App Store through a private portal. And those apps were spying on the users who used them, including a significant percentage of minors under the age of 18. I wouldn't call that protecting users. The prior week, Facebook had a legal case accusing it, apparently without conflict, of essentially encouraging children to spend lots of money on in-app purchases in games, in some cases up to thousands of dollars on their parents' credit cards. And they knew this was going on and did nothing to stop it and tried to pretend as though that wasn't a problem. I would say those are two very disturbing things. Also last week, Facebook kicked off ProPublica out of it from doing the audits of Facebook's political advertising site. They were just going in to make sure that Facebook was doing a complete job, and they stopped letting them do that. Also last week, Snopes, the fact-checking site, gave up working with Facebook and said it was basically they were impossible to work with. So I would actually argue that the current evidence suggests that Facebook is not making progress in a material way, and there are new issues that affect Facebook, Google, and others related to, say, smart speakers and smart video devices and smart televisions, smart cars, that suggest that the problems we have today with privacy are tiny in comparison to the ones that are coming right now if you put Alexa-based devices or Google Home devices or Facebook portal devices into your house.
Now, Rodger, I sat down with Sheryl Sandberg last week and I asked her point blank, why should anyone trust Facebook? Why should anyone trust her? Take a listen to what she had to say.
It has been a challenging time for Facebook, and we need to earn back people's trust with the steps we take. We've changed our profitability because we want to take the hard steps to protect people on the platform. And you see us doing that. You see what happens with elections, the U.S. midterms, and around the world, fake accounts, decreasing the distribution of fake news. These are hard and ongoing problems, but we are determined to do the hard work and keep doing it.
Now, Rodger, Facebook has hired thousands and thousands of people to double down on safety and security. They say they've changed the algorithm in the news feed to tilt it more towards personal news rather than world news. I know none of that is enough for you. If that's not enough, what should Facebook be doing? And if Facebook isn't going to do it, what should users in the government be doing?
Yeah, Emily, here's the way I would tell you I think about the problem. I've studied this now for 3 years to try to understand why this stuff happens on Facebook. Remember, I'm still a shareholder, and remember, this was one of the crowning achievements of a long, long career, and I'm really proud of Facebook, and it really bothers me that this is not going well, and it's obviously not in my economic interest to be a critic. So I'm convinced that the business model is the problem. It's the problem at Facebook. It's the problem at Google. They essentially have this advertising business model that depends on monopolizing the attention and manipulating the attention of the user. In order to do that, the algorithms are tuned to focus on emotional things that trigger outrage, that trigger fear, or tickle people with rewards of some kind. And, you know, when you're doing that for long enough, people first develop a habit, then they develop an addiction, and once they're in an addiction, they're vulnerable to manipulation by bad actors on the outside.
Rodger McNamee, co-founder of Elevation Partners and author of Zucked. Still ahead, a brutal cold snap gripped the country in January, bringing dangerous sub-zero temperatures to the Midwest. The EPA tells us what it means for climate change next. Plus, automakers are shifting gears, spending more money on electric cars. But is the infrastructure in place to meet growing demand? This is Bloomberg. The Midwest faced a brutal Arctic blast at the end of January, and President Trump jumped at the chance to take a jab at global warming. He tweeted, quote, "In the beautiful Midwest, wind chill temperatures are reaching minus 60 degrees, the coldest ever recorded. In coming days, expected to get even colder. People can't last outside even for minutes. What the is going on with global warming? Please come back fast. We need you." On Monday, I sat down with EPA Acting Administrator Andrew Wheeler, who's up for nomination to formally lead the agency, and asked if he agrees with the president.
global warming is certainly occurring, and man certainly has an impact on global warming. I think there's still some issues as far as the extent and how much for any individual weather event. But you know, the important thing, what we're doing is following the law, and we're following the law that Congress passed. The Clean Air Act tells us what we can and cannot do, the Supreme Court decisions, and under my leadership, we are following what the statutes that Congress has passed, as well as the direction that we've received from the courts.
But does the cold give you pause about the validity of global warming?
Well, I don't think you can look at any one weather event and determine whether or not the planet is warming or cooling. I think you have to look at the models overall over a number of years, and you can't just focus on one particular weather event.
So the president's conclusion might be flawed.
Oh, I didn't say that. You know, I think there's a lot more variability in the climate models and the climate data than most people realize. And I think the president's reflecting on that.
Now, you did, at your confirmation hearing, you said you were an 8 or a 9 on a 10-point scale of concern about climate change, though some would look at the actions that the EPA has taken thus far as retreating from aggressively regulating carbon dioxide emissions. How do you square that? Are you retreating from the fight?
No, we're not retreating at all. You know, the Obama administration put forward their plan for the electric power sector, the Clean Power Plan. That was stayed by the Supreme Court, so it never actually took effect. What we're doing is proposing a regulation, the Affordable Clean Energy Rule for the power sector, that follows the law, so it will be upheld by the courts, and it will lead to 34% reduction in CO2 over the lifetime of that regulation. So we're moving forward. We're making cuts in CO2. CO2 has gone down since 2005. That was the high water mark for the United States. But it's a global issue. It's a global problem, and the president recognizes that, which is why he pulled out of the Paris Climate Accord. The Paris Climate Accord was not a global solution. We do need a global solution if we're going to address that issue, and we don't want to unilaterally disarm our economy when other economies around the world are not doing what they should be doing for climate.
One of your colleagues, Bill Wareham, said he's getting regular climate science updates from staff, from scientists. What are you doing to educate yourself?
I am as well. I've had several briefings from the career scientists at the agency. We had several more planned for January. We're going to get those rescheduled now for February because of the agency was shut down in January. But no, I'm getting regular briefings from my staff, from my career staff at the agency.
So if not Paris, what's better?
Well, something that will bring China and other emerging markets, you know, to the table for real reductions.
My conversation with EPA Acting Administrator Andrew Wheeler. Meantime, by 2030, electric car sales are expected to surge to 30 million worldwide. This according to Bloomberg New Energy Finance. One company preparing for the onslaught is EVgo. The company provides more than 1,000 public charging stations for electric cars across 34 states. In the first half of 2018 alone, the company's network charged more than 42 million miles. I sat down with CEO Kathy Zoe on Monday to discuss the future of electrification.
I feel like we're at an inflection point. The car companies have announced $300 billion that they're investing in making EVs. There's going to be 160 new models over the next few years. This is going from crazy boutique small to mainstream, and consumers are going to love it. Everybody I know that's driven an EV loves driving it. So I think what the car companies and us in the industry have in mind is the cost has to be competitive, the range has to be strong, and there has to be charging infrastructure everywhere.
So Tesla is obviously in the lead here. Where are you seeing real competition from competitors? Audi, Mercedes. What company should Tesla be worried about this year?
Look, when they made their third quarter targets, every car company in the world, I think every boardroom said, oh my goodness. So I think they need to be worried about everybody. Now, what we see here in the United States is so much progress. I mean, General Motors is great. The Nissan has been around for a long time, but GM and Nissan now have over 200-mile cars that are affordable. That is obviously really big. I mean, Ford had historically been a bit of a laggard, and now Ford is leaning forward on making an electric F-150. So I don't think that there's a car company that's serious in the world that's not investing seriously in electrification.
Now, how far out are we really from mainstream adoption of electric cars and fully relying on charging stations?
We're a few years. I mean, we've already got 1 million EVs on the road in the United States. We suspect that that's going to be probably 6 or 7 million in the next 5 years or so, which is a lot. Which means, you know, and look, Bloomberg New Energy Finance says that it's going to be fully 10% of sales in 2025, but then an inflection point on the S curve, and we're going to be looking at 30 or 40% of sales in 2030.
So what's more needed in terms of infrastructure?
Well, what EVgo does is fast charging. And what we're seeing is, again, historically, most people who bought an EV charged at home. But what we're now seeing is people who live in apartments, they need to charge away from home quickly. The most interesting new bit is with the rise of the ride-hailing economy, where like my kids who are millennials don't want cars, but they do ride sharing all the time. Those drivers of those cars, like for Lyft and Uber, they need to charge quickly, and they need to charge away from home, and they charge a lot.
When are electric trucks going to hit the scene? And then how does the charging infrastructure change to support that?
The electric trucks are starting to hit the scene now. I would say that light-duty vehicles, regular cars, are a couple of years ahead of the trucks. But I just came from your Bloomberg conference, and there were a number of truck companies that had talked about. They said, "We've placed an order for 1,000. We've placed an order for a few hundred." So the experiments are beginning. But again, I say within a few years, you're going to see all fleets are going to be relying increasingly on electrification.
So how would you compare the road ahead in the U.S. market to China? What's the next 5 years look like in both countries?
Fascinatingly, the Chinese are moving really, really quickly. And the difference in the policy settings are what might make China move even faster. There's some say that, like right now, it's even money. You know, that we could win or China could win. But if the Chinese government puts policies in place to accelerate the market, then there are some people who would expect that 70% of EV sales in China, a very big economy, are going to be EV by 2030, and nobody thinks that the U.S. market will move quite that fast. So again, it has to do with creating policy reasons for the manufacturing to go ahead fast.
So what are the risks? Tesla broke ground in Shanghai on a factory. What are the risks you see to Tesla, which is in the lead, and the EV market in particular, over the next few years? Where are the biggest challenges?
I think that the market is growing so quickly. The market for non-luxury vehicles, there's going to be a lot of market entrants. So I think that Tesla's going to have to compete with that. They're going to have to compete on cost. They've got beautiful, beautiful vehicles. But look, the vehicles that Hyundai and Kia and Nissan and GM are bringing to market, they're going to compete with Tesla. It's going to be great. And EVgo is going to charge those cars.
Good for you.
Yeah, exactly.
That was EVgo CEO Kathy Zoe. Coming up, President Trump boasted Foxconn's expansion into Wisconsin last summer, but on the ground, things not turning out as promised. That's next. This is Bloomberg. Foxconn says it still plans to build a manufacturing plant in the state of Wisconsin, creating as many as 13,000 well-paying jobs for, quote, amazing Wisconsin workers, early as 2022. But many on the ground say this is simply not happening. Bloomberg's Austin Carr wrote all about it in this week's issue of Bloomberg Business Week, and we caught up with him on Wednesday.
For the past couple months, we've been talking to a lot of people on the ground at Foxconn, some of their early operations there. And so far, the big differences are that they say things aren't living up to promises. The pay has been low. Workers feel expendable. Foxconn has been making an aggressive push towards more automation, meaning a lot of their roles would likely be sort of not around, obsolete in the coming years. People say training is an issue, in that, indeed, in one case, a worker actually had his finger nearly sliced off on the production line. So there's just been sort of a jarring disparity between what was promised by the president and some of these jobs that are actually being doled out to residents of Wisconsin right now.
There are some issues that have developed just in the last few weeks, whereby one of Terry Goh, the chair of Foxconn, one of his assistants, actually said the company was reconsidering some of its plans. Which plans exactly?
That has been a constant refrain throughout the past year or so, or ever since this deal was signed. It's actually gone through a ton of changes. First, they were going to build a massive factory. Then they scaled down those operations. As you noted just a couple days ago, they actually said, oh, we're not going to build a factory. And then they flip-flopped again after President Trump had a phone call with Chairman Go. So I think the bigger issue is that a lot of people don't know what they're actually building in Wisconsin. They've made a lot of commitments to their contract, but they're not actually sticking to those. Those plans have been evolving since it was signed. And a lot of the sources that we talked to for this story just say that the plans internally at the company, both at its downtown Milwaukee headquarters as well as its Mount Pleasant, Wisconsin factory, felt amorphous and ever-changing.
Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson was on Bloomberg television earlier today and was asked about this situation. Take a listen to what he had to say.
The environment keeps changing. There's all kinds of uncertainty. Well, what businesses always want is certain and stable a business environment as possible. And so markets change. Apple reported less demand for their products. That obviously affects the equation. But in general, all the incentives that were given by Governor Walker were prospective.
Is this because of Apple?
It is partly because of Apple that there's been pressure on the company around the global market conditions, some of the trade war issues. But let's just remind the senator that they missed their first-year hiring targets, the maximum first-year hiring targets, by about 82%. They ended the year with only 178 full-time workers. That's far short of 1,040 that they committed to hiring at the maximum end of that threshold. The company can certainly afford to hire more workers. That's not just because of softened iPhone sales. But then the larger issue is what the senator is implying is that there's no risk for the state because they won't actually give any subsidies unless the company lives up to its hiring and its investment spend. And while that's partly true, the truth is that they've already invested a lot of money, both in man hours, local and state commitments to infrastructure costs. Hundreds of millions of dollars have already been spent. And so there's sort of myth that there hasn't been any risk or any cost to taxpayers already, and that's just simply not true.
So, bigger picture, what does this mean for global manufacturing and the supply chain?
I think that the larger issue is that this romanticized notion that President Trump has sort of talked about and made a key campaign pledge, and indeed talked about in the State of the Union last night, it's really more challenging to bring that back to the U.S. than a lot of people had anticipated, at least the proponents. Of course, that would be fantastic if factory workers could come back. You could create more blue-collar jobs. But the truth is, it's really challenging, not just economically when you're competing against China and Mexico, but the larger issue here is that it's really hard to replicate that supply chain stateside. A lot of that network is set up in Asia, in mainland China, where Foxconn has most of its manufacturing operations. That's why when you have that network, it's easier to build things like iPhones. So trying to replicate that here in Wisconsin is going to be a huge challenge, particularly because there's not just the lack of supply chain, but also a lack of talent pool.
Has the president commented on this situation in particular recently?
The White House had declined to participate in our story, but an administration official did tell me that the president and the White House would be, quote, disappointed if Foxconn reduces its investments in Wisconsin. Any reductions they'd be disappointed with.
That was Bloomberg's Austin Carr. And that does it for this edition of the Best of Bloomberg Technology. We will bring you all the latest in tech throughout the week. Tune in every day, 5 p.m. in New York, 2 p.m. in San Francisco. And Bloomberg Technology is live streaming on Twitter. You can check us out at Technology. And be sure to follow our global breaking news network, TikTok, on Twitter. This is Bloomberg.